Hey everybody, I'm Katallina, and today we're here to talk about episode 13 of Mission Yozakura Family. Today Taiyo was faced with a variety of situations that tied into the idea of he has lost so much and yet there is so much he could yet lose. And he was faced with the challenge of both dealing with this on an emotional front, protecting those he loved as they dealt with it on an emotional front, and dealing with actually figuring out what steps he can take to prevent further tragedy from befalling him and those he cares about. The show opens with Taiyo, Shion, and Mutsumi looking at information that they found out and realizing that Taiyo's family was at Mutsumi's family's wedding before any of them were born, and the reality that there was some kind of indirect connection between the Yozakura family and the Asano family even before Mutsumi or Taiyo's birth, and the reality that this may or may not somehow connect the two together. And as we do further research, we see that there is some kind of thread. We actually end up going to this library, and to me this was one of the highlights of the episode because this library took the concept of quietness and concern for not disturbing other readers and all that sort of thing, and it dialed it up to 11. It actually made it seem as though the books were like the land of the dead, and the librarian was a crazy silver-ranked spy who was going to kill anyone who made any sound. And we see people get their asses handed to them, and eventually we realize that we found something we wanted to look at. We start looking at it, and then, just like an old school Inspector Gadget episode, it explodes, and this leads the librarian to come after Taiyo. And fortunately for Taiyo, he does have backup from Shion and Mutsumi, and eventually Mutsumi actually uses the headphones that Shion gave Taiyo when he went into this library to play a super loud sound which knocks the librarian on her ass, because it turns out that the reason she is so cantankerous about sounds is because she is incredibly sensitive to them, and that allows Taiyo to get out. But in going to the library and doing the research that he does, Taiyo gets a single word, I believe it's Tanpopo, and that is actually apparently the name of a different spy organization or a different grouping in general, and they have been plotting against the Yozakuras like pretty much from before when Taiyo or Mutsumi were born, and they are actually responsible for the death of Mutsumi's mother. So we find out that there is definitely like double reason for Taiyo to want to go and find these people and find out what the hell is going on. And he actually gets kind of unwilling and unwavering support from one of the most unlikely sources ever, which of course would be from Kyoichiro, who actually backs and supports him and encourages him in going after this information because of course Kyoichiro wants it for Mutsumi's sake, but Taiyo wants it both for that and for his family, of course. But at the same time, it's kind of funny because the scene we see between Taiyo and Kyoichiro is not like two friendly brother-in-laws going out for like a burger and fries or something. Oh no, we see again that Taiyo is tied up, that there are great big heavy things on him, and it actually ties into the episode this time. It isn't like when he messed up in a previous episode and he was like dangling from a chandelier. This time it seems like either intentionally or not, what was happening to him ends up being used as a way to have trained him to be able to handle having heavy weighted things on his body, which he needs because in the next section of the story he ends up going to a hospital and he and Mutsumi are disguised as an elderly couple. I kind of find it crazy that they continue to send Mutsumi into these dangerous situations, but I've got to remember that while Mutsumi doesn't have superpowers, she is trained in all the basic spy stuff, and she definitely has a lot of guts for somebody who doesn't actually have access to the kind of powers that her siblings do. We do end up kind of discovering what Mutsumi's superpower is in this episode though, and ironically it ties back to what we were saying at the start of the show, which is of course that basically Mutsumi's superpower is the capacity to make babies, but it's much more complicated than that. Apparently there is a compound in Mutsumi's blood, or in the blood of the Yozakura in general, that makes it so that when somebody gets a hold of that, if it's a regular person, they get a hold of that and they get jacked up like they're on steroids, and of course when that transfers between Yozakuras, it actually is like when they have kids and stuff, it makes them much more powerful. Well, this Tampopo organization who is trying to go after Mutsumi and who killed Mutsumi's mother is trying to get Mutsumi's heart, and they really, really, really are going to wish that Taiyo had never found that out, because Taiyo has lost everything once before. I'm pretty darn sure that Taiyo is not going to let that happen again, especially now that he is aware of the things that are going on in this world, and now that he is training and setting himself up in such a way that there is going to be something he can do about it. Yes, we do see Taiyo struggle in this episode. Yes, the jerk that Taiyo goes after does get away, but Taiyo gets information and Taiyo gets closer to finding out what is happening. I like the fact that when they send Taiyo out on these missions, they don't just make Taiyo like some kind of super boss or god or something. They make it so that Taiyo often gets some kind of information or success, but they also make it just as likely that there are aspects of a mission where Taiyo fails. This really balances the reality that Taiyo is still very new to everything, is still learning, is still going to make mistakes, while not holding the story back in such a way that Taiyo's inexperience gets in the way of actually progressing the plot. I think they do a really wonderful job of that here. The other thing that I really liked in this episode is that in connection to this whole concern over what has happened to people or what could happen to people, we actually see a deep and emotional core of connectivity between Taiyo and Mutsumi. We see a beautiful moment at the start of the episode where Mutsumi is absolutely devastated when she realizes that their two families had some kind of connection before they were born, and she instantly fears that Taiyo is going to hold her and the others responsible for the death of his parents. And Taiyo is like, what on earth are you talking about? You had nothing to do with this. You had no control over this. And this is something that happened in the past, whereas you are my present and future. At another point of the episode, we actually see it be Taiyo who is more vulnerable when the two of them are disguised as elderly people, and they're talking about the idea that, hey, just think, someday this is going to be real and we're going to be old and wrinkly and in our final years together. And Taiyo actually tells her that he hopes that he goes first because he couldn't picture continuing to live without her, which, I mean, seemed a bit melodramatic for a pair of teenagers, but I mean, this is a story, and part of the story is at least in part a romance, so it was cute to see that there is that kind of connection and that kind of loyalty between the two of them. And seeing Mutsumi take care of Taiyo as an elderly woman taking care of her elderly husband was actually really cute, even though we knew they were in disguise. I thought that was really heartfelt. The last interesting thing to consider is the reality that when Taiyo is confronting the person from Tampopo who actually has the information and stuff that he's trying to get from the hospital they've disguised themselves to get into, and they actually end up in an altercation, the guy actually flees and does not kill Taiyo, which kind of took me by surprise. I didn't know whether it was because he didn't think that he could for some reason, or whether something else is going on. I mean, it's a 50-50 coin toss, but it did pique my interest, and it does make me question just how much is going down here. The idea that they want Mutsumi's heart is absolutely insane, and of course it is a funny connection back to the reality that they want Mutsumi's literal heart, whereas Taiyo of course wants Mutsumi's emotional or psychological heart, and the two are actually in direct competition, because if one exists for the purpose that one of them wants, it can't exist for the other. So that's definitely going to be something. Overall, though, this was a very interesting episode that tied more to the main overarching plot that seems to be going on within the first season. It was very interesting to see how we're slowly getting the mystery of what happened to these two families and how it is being revealed to us, and it'll be interesting as we go on to hopefully see more and more how it will actually be resolved. Anyway, I'd love to know what you guys thought of this episode, so feel free to drop a comment below and let me know, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Talk to you later. Bye!